Another place where Tomlin possibly would draw some interest, the Atlanta Falcons, who might be looking for a coach when this is all said and done. Now, last week, someone from ESPN reported that Arthur Smith is safe, barring a disaster. Disaster happened on Sunday in Charlotte when they blew a game they should have won and fell a game behind the Saints and the Buccaneers in the NFC South championship chase. Here's Arthur Blank, owner of the team, speaking to Georgia Public Broadcasting about the future of head coach Arthur Smith.
We're committed to Coach Smith. We're going to play these last 3 games. We play them to win them, and we'll let the season play out and go from there. Obviously, this has not been the kind of year we expected, and you would hear that first from Coach Smith. You'd hear it from our fans, you hear it from our players. So we understand that. We understand the challenges. So at the end of the year, we'll assess where we are and go from there.
Yeah, we're committed to Coach Smith for the next 3 weeks. We're not. I guess the headline is they're not going to fire Arthur Smith before the end of the regular season. After the regular season concludes, who knows what's going to happen? And a lot of it depends upon who's available. See, the one thing that doesn't get discussed nearly enough because we only have so much bandwidth and we're focused on this glorious landing of the plane that is the end of the season where we find out who makes the playoffs and who doesn't. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. These owners don't wait until the morning after their season ends to begin making the decision on whether or not they're going to fire the coach, which is the companion to who am I going to get to replace him. They already have their wish lists. It's one of the reasons why the Rooney Rule is outdated, because these owners decide who they want to hire sometimes months before they fire the coach they have. They've been thinking about it. They know what they need to do. They know what they think they need to do. And that's the one thing that we'll never know because they're not going to come out and tell us, but I think we've seen the evidence of it. The most glaring example was everybody knew that Dan Snyder was hiring Mike Shanahan some 12, 14, 15 years ago, whenever it was. I mean, there was no discretion involved there with keeping that secret under wraps. But Arthur Blank may have a damn good idea, Chris, of exactly what he's going to do, unless they make the playoffs. They don't make the playoffs, he may know exactly where he's going, what he's going to try to do. And calling the Steelers and inquiring about Mike Tomlin, you do a lot worse than Mike Tomlin to try to turn the Falcons around.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I don't think this is an easy decision. I don't. I think there is a good amount of context here to the situation, right? You look at Atlanta, and, hey, the 2 previous years, I think we would say they played better than expectations and were in the mix longer than we expected, right? I think it's fair to say that. The last 2 years, Marcus Mariota last year, the year before that with Matt Ryan. All right, so there was positives. They have the roster in a spot where you go, damn, there's some good here. It's one of the better O-lines in football. They got Drake London. They got Kyle Pitts. They need another legit receiver, somebody that can scare you a little bit because Drake London is not that kind of guy. He's not. He's kind of like he's a Michael Thomas. He kind of want to work him the middle of the field underneath. It's not going to be go routes all the time. That's not what he is. But they got the running back. Their defense is top 10 in football. That's all there, right? The big problem is the quarterback. And how much blame does Arthur Smith get with that? Was he one that was pounding the table and was like, Desmond Ridder has to be our starter this year? All right, well, if that's part of it, then, okay, yeah, then he deserves some of that blame. But, also into this situation and where we're at with it, I don't think he deserves a whole lot of blame for how it got here, right? They flirted with Deshaun Watson. They forced the turnover of the quarterback room quicker than maybe the coaches were expecting, with the flirtation of Deshaun Watson and then Matt Ryan going, hey, see you later. Here's the Jersey State bird. I'm out of here, and give him the middle finger.
Oh,
right. I didn't do it.
I thought you were going to do it.
Yeah, I didn't. I held it back for the Christmas season. But either way, that I don't think deserves to be blamed on Arthur Smith. So that's where I look at it to be a tough one because I do feel like they're on the cusp of being a very good team. The quarterback situation, obviously, making the second change this year or the third change this year is a real issue with this football team.
I will say this.
Yeah.
It's not as if Matt Ryan was playing 2016 MVP level when he did go to the Colts last season.
No.
So it was time to move on from Matt Ryan, but you got to move in somebody who can play at a high level.
Well, I think they did it in a way where, like, the coaches, everything was so unexpected that it forced their hand and maybe made them get to a judgment or a quarterback decision a little quicker than maybe they were going to. That was my big point. Yeah.
They could have had Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, that's what we know. Right. You're right. I know.
They didn't need Taylor Heineke. They could have gone after Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield got a $4.5 million salary from the Buccaneers with incentives on the back end.
Yeah.
Mayfield is a candidate for comeback player of the year.
Definitely.
Mayfield is a fringe, very fringe, but a fringe MVP candidate for what he's doing. You go into Lambeau Field and you become only the second quarterback ever with a 158.3 perfect passer rating. People need to take notice. He's the best thing the Bucs have going right now, and he provides that grit, that spark, that attitude, that moxie, the word Jason Garrett would use, but it's absolutely accurate in this situation. That's what Baker Mayfield brings, and the Falcons could have had him. And I think that's part of it too. And you wonder, I love Terry Fontenot, but you wonder how much of this
That's what I mean.
This glare.
That's what I'm
now
saying.
Now that Arthur Blank is watching,
right.
How much of it's Fontenot, how much of it's Smith.
That's all I'm saying.
If you get rid of one, do you get rid of both? Do you clear out completely and start over like the Chargers are doing? So
what's your feel? Like, what do you think? Like, what's your gut, right? Because, like, really, again, you look at it and you go, man, there's a lot of pieces there. Do we want to blow this up, right, and get a new coach, or do we want to stay the course and then go all in on finding a quarterback this offseason, right? So, I mean, I always appreciate your feel and your pasta and meatballs. Where do you think this is going?
Here's what I think.
Yeah.
Arthur Blank is 81. It's not quite Leon Hess territory, but Arthur Blank is 81. And if you're thinking about making changes.
Looks good for 81.
It can't just be the coach. If you're thinking about making changes, it's got to be reset button. And I include within that reset button the guy who has still gone on to have a successful career in the NFL despite the fact that he drafted you. Rich McKay. You got to clear them all out. You got to clear them all out. Sorry, Rich. We love you, Rich. But
how about sorry
you're part
to
of
me?
The problem too.
Okay.
Rich McKay falls into that very rare category that is prevalent with a lot of teams where if things go well, you're basking in the glow. And if things don't, hey, I'm not in football operations. Don't fire me. But he's the guy who's whispering to Arthur Blank, this is what you should do. And it's so funny. And I love this. It's like Game of Thrones stuff. These owners have a degree of insecurity about making good decisions when it comes to football because they kind of know they don't really know. So they find somebody to tell them what they should do. And that person ends up not being as accountable as the GM and the head coach would be. Sometimes they should be. Sometimes the fever dream needs to break and Cal McNair needs to fire Jack Easterby. And look at what that's done for the Texans. So I'm not trying to get Rich McKay fired here in this Christmas season or any season. I'm just saying if you're thinking about firing Arthur Smith, you may want to broaden the lens a little bit. If you're thinking about getting rid of one guy who you believe to be the problem is broader than the head coach. If you believe there's a problem that needs to be fixed, other than let's give this another year. They were 7-10 quietly in 21, 7-10 quietly in 22. But, this year, division's wide open. One of these teams is going to win it, except the Panthers. And it's going to be easy to say that could have been us. And that may be the thing that gets 81-year-old Arthur Blank to say, I need to make change. My point is this. If you're thinking about making change, you need to be thinking about more than the coach. I think that's fair to say.
All right. I hear you. That's definitely logical and makes sense. I hear you. We'll see where it goes. This is going to be an interesting one. That's certainly one I'm going to have my eye on because I think, again, that's a job that I do think, minus the quarterback situation, a lot of coaches who evaluate the teams and where a job could go and all that, they're going to look at the Falcons and go, damn, they got a lot. They got it all, actually. They just got to fix out this, quarterback situation and a little piece in here and there. But a lot of the dirty work's been done already, and that's where it'll be tough on Arthur Blank.
And it pains me to be that candid 5 days before Christmas. I really like Terry Fontenot. I've talked to him a couple of times. I really like him. I like what I've seen of Arthur Smith as a coach for the most part. I didn't like the whole Bijan Robinson thing. And he knows, he gets it, he understands. I think he's learned from that moment. And I like Rich McKay, even though we disagree on, substantive issues about officiating and the NFL not being proactive, and he's the head of the competition committee. But I've argued for years, the people who are accountable with their jobs in any football organization, they need to be equally accountable. You can't allow a culture to exist where when everything goes sideways, there's any incentive for the GM to blame the coach to blame the GM. That is toxic. That is poisonous. That is bad for any football organization or any sports organization. It needs to be, Chris, that they are joined at the hip. If one goes, both go. If one stays, both stay. We either succeed together or we fail together. That is the way to build the right culture, a winning culture where everyone works together and you don't get into these late season, how am I going to save my job? How am I going to blame the other guy for why we suck right now? And the other guy's doing the same thing. And you got two people who, instead of focusing on their jobs and trying to win, are focused on, how am I going to blame all this on the other guy?
Yeah, I hear you there. That's not a good formula. Certainly not a recipe for success. I'm with you.
Happens a lot.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.